The president, to be clear, is going to ask for a recount in Wisconsin, which is at 1% or less, the difference. He's going to file a lawsuit in Michigan over what's happening there. I told you just a few minutes ago that at 6 o'clock yesterday morning, suddenly like 140 or 130,000 votes showed up, boosting Joe Biden immensely. And those ballots, at least in one of those states, were 100% ballots cast for Joe Biden. So we're having all kinds of issues. Pennsylvania also, of course, the president is further ahead in Pennsylvania than these other contested states, and there are all kinds of things happening there. And I want to talk about that and other things with our guest. Tom Fitton is the president of Judicial Watch. He's a good friend, and it's been a long time since we've talked. You see him on television all the time. He has just done an incredible job leading Judicial Watch, the leading voice in trying to get to the truth on all of these scandals this past almost 4 years of President Trump's service, and then before that, too. Tom, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, Sandy, good to be with you. Thank you for the good word.
Yeah, no, I mean it. Tom, from your assessment, it can be very discouraging. When I woke up after a nap yesterday, looking at the board saying Biden 264, Trump 214, that's very discouraging for people. How do you see this? Do you think the president can actually pull this out, or is the deck so stacked it's an impossible job?
Well, I think the longer time goes on and the more illicit counting that goes on, the less likely he'll be successful, at least in this initial round of being certified more or less as the new president. My concern is, you go back to the beginning, which is that the election day was on Tuesday. It wasn't yesterday. It's not today. And there's nothing normal about what's going on. It's an indication of, in my view, it's evidence of fraud when you have voting going on or counting going on past the election day deadline. And I don't mean deadline in the sense, there's a political deadline. I mean statutorily. And your listeners can look this up. It's 3 U.S.C. Section 1 of the Federal Code, the U.S. Code, and it says, and I'm paraphrasing, you got to pick your electors on Tuesday. So the counting really shouldn't have happened that's going on. The president was leading and should have been certified as the victor on Tuesday, and it didn't happen. And the question is, will the courts be brave enough to walk it back? And if they're not, will Congress be brave enough to assert the rule of law again? Because Congress, in the end, resolves any disputes.
One of the things, Tom, that really eats at me, I saw it happening. I knew it when it was happening, that it was happening, and I called it out when it was happening. It didn't do any good, and that was this. President Trump was the only person, the only spokesperson, certainly for the Republican Party, for conservatives, who warned us over and over and over and over again that this early voting, all of these extraordinary measures, mailing ballots indiscriminately, was dangerous to our voting system, would create chaos. And yet, Tom, to my knowledge, not a single Republican leader, even including Mitch McConnell or the others, and maybe if I'm wrong, correct me, stood up and said the same thing or tried to do anything about it.
Well, they were nervous because the Republicans were nervous that there was a whole area of voting, namely mail-in voting, that they wouldn't be participating in, and they thought they would lose as a result. And so they probably generally agreed with the opportunities for chaos and fraud with mass mail-in ballot schemes that have been pushed forward. But on the other hand, they didn't want to cede the ground to the other side in terms of participation. And I don't say that to excuse what went on. I say it as a way of explaining what I think was their thinking. We were calling attention to this. I testified to Congress. I said, this is going to be chaos. And back in April, and we knew what was coming. There's nothing surprising about what's happened.
No.
They talked about the red mirage of President Trump winning on Election Day, and then the votes coming in later, too late, in my view, to knock him out. And that's exactly what happened. Now, it may not happen, who knows, maybe the numbers will just solidify in a way that he wins in Arizona, he wins in Pennsylvania, he retains his lead in Georgia, and he's the next president. But as you point out, the signs aren't good that any of that's going to happen. All of that's going to happen in those three places.
Well, except that, would you not agree? And I know you do. I just don't want people to give up yet. And I'm calling for people to come out and join these rallies in various states, in Michigan and in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, to come out and let their voices be heard and just put the left on notice that we are watching. This is not going to go down easily, because it will get worse if we don't do that.
Right, and there are legal challenges that can be brought. I'm not quite confident that the
Oh, Tom, we lost you.
I don't believe the legal challenges they've brought thus far will solve the issue. But beyond that, in the end, it's a political question resolved by Congress. If there are disputes about the outcomes in elections, the electors can be challenged in Congress, and that's a political fight. So your call to activism is well-founded.
Yep. There are two themes that I hear the left striking. This is not surprising to us either, but I think people need to understand that their thoughts are being manipulated, and that is, you count all votes. You have to count. The president doesn't want to count all votes. He wants to stop the counting. We have to count all the votes. It's the right of the people. And the second is, there's no evidence of voter fraud. What evidence of voter fraud do you have? There's no evidence of voter fraud. These are the two themes I keep hearing. I'd love for you to respond to those if you could.
Well, when you have, for instance, Philadelphia stop counting for no good reason, that's evidence of voter fraud. There's no good reason to do it other than maybe to put your thumb on the scales. When you have a system set up that virtually allows voting fraud and in an undetectable way, you should presume voting fraud. This is not a legal question. This is a political question. This is, do the American people have confidence in the outcome of the election? And is that confidence undermined or increased as a result of the way the elections have been run? Anyone who tells you it's been increased as a result of the elections have been run, obviously hasn't told you.
Hey, Tom, we lost you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Okay. Anyone who thinks, that's where you were.
Yeah, anyone who thinks that the confidence in the election is high hasn't really been talking to half the country about it. And
yeah.
The evidence is there, and how do you know the evidence is there? Because people don't trust the elections. I mean, I know it's circular, but that's the standard isn't a legal standard.
Well, it's
if you got a bank that has no security guard, no checks, and cash is coming in and out, and no one knows what's going on, are you going to go into that bank? No, and you can presume something bad's happening.
Absolutely. There's just common sense. With the nature of how they're handling this, common sense. The fact that they are covering up the windows in the count center in Michigan so that people can't see in. The fact that they're making people who are supposed to be observing and making sure that things are done properly, that they are putting a cardboard so that they can't see or that they have to stand back 6 feet. Common sense tells you that's because something is happening that shouldn't be happening. And so, but that's the themes we're going to be hearing. Pennsylvania is your home state, isn't it, Tom?
No, I'm originally from New York.
Oh, how could I
Although
make
I've been
that?
in D.C. so long, I can't even say New York's my home state. It's sad to say.
Nevertheless, you know a lot about Pennsylvania, and we have actually not talked too much about what's going on there. So give people an idea from your perspective of what's happening in Pennsylvania. The president is actually further ahead in Pennsylvania than he is in these other states. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, the question is, are the so-called votes that have yet to be counted going to change the outcome of the election that was, in my view, should have been certified on Tuesday, which is that he won? And then secondly, there's a second category of votes that are supposed to be segregated, but nevertheless or allegedly will be counted, ballots that arrive after Election Day, which in my view is an abomination under the law, ballots that may or may not be postmarked prior to Election Day, and the signature requirements that help ensure that they're actually valid are also been thrown aside. So there are all these pathways for fraud in Pennsylvania, not pathways for victory for Joe Biden in any legitimate sense.
But my understanding is from all that I'm reading this morning that the Supreme Court left open, they said that they could not resolved the issue of what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had put in place, which was throwing out the signature verification and also allowing ballots to arrive 3 days after the election. But they said that they would, because they didn't have the time. So they said to set those votes that came in late aside, and if it came back to them, they would adjudicate more deeply. Those are my words. My understanding is that's happening. And what do you think the chances are of Pennsylvania not being able to count all those ballots past Tuesday?
If it changes the outcome of the election, the chances are less likely. If there's no change, the Supreme Court will say, no harm, no foul. So it depends. It depends. If the numbers are significant enough that the outcome of the election could change, the court's going to have to resolve it. And I suspect the majority of the court's going to be quite skeptical of allowing ballots to be counted that arrive after Election Day.
Yeah. Well, so we have today now the whole situation with Nevada, which is, this is my prediction, Tom. Since Joe Biden, they've given him Phoenix, or Arizona, when they shouldn't have, but that puts him at 264. So if he wins Nevada, he will declare himself the victor, because that'll put him at, that'll give him enough votes to reach the threshold. So Nevada doesn't have to turn in their votes for several days, as I understand it, but I predict they're going to do that just so that Joe Biden can declare victory. And I'd like to know what you think about that.
Well, that's a fair conclusion. Why should we presume good faith by these officials that have delayed the adjudication of their elections past the statutory deadline? We're in undiscovered country in this regard. It's never happened before in American history, as best I can tell. I haven't examined what went on around the Civil War, but I have a feeling we even had a better system in place while we were voting during the Civil War.
Yeah.
There's nothing normal about what's going on, Sandy, and so you're right to be skeptical of how the process is proceeding, even if they're pretending to follow the rules that they made up as they're going along.
Okay, well, we have just a few minutes left, but I want to ask you this, because some people are looking for the sunshine, and I'm not against looking for sunshine, but the sunshine is that Republicans picked up seats in the House, so they're going to be stronger. They didn't win the House, but they picked up seats. The other part of the sunshine is that the Republicans have, at least we think, maintained control of the Senate, and so there won't be a change in the filibuster in the Senate, allowing any kind of legislation to pass unfettered, unchecked. There won't be the addition of Hawaii and Puerto Rico, so that we'd have 4 more senators and a permanent majority. There won't be this wash of packing the court. So with Joe Biden, if it is declared the winner, there won't be that much difference, right, Tom? That's what they tell us.
Yeah, I think, no matter how the election is resolved ultimately by January, either president's going to have a challenge, in the sense the country is strongly divided and deeply divided. And certainly if there's a President Biden, he's not coming in with a 60-40 landslide with two houses of Congress behind him. So any changes he wants to make that conservatives would object to are going to be difficult for him to make. Obviously, there are regulatory changes he may be able to make under the law. But court packing, adding states, like adding Washington, D.C., making it a state and a pure power grab, that isn't going to happen no matter what happens at the presidential level.
Yeah, but what I think about is a Biden Justice Department. I think about what's happened to our police and what a gut punch this will be for, they're retiring in droves and leaving the departments, and now we'll have a Justice Department that we will not recognize. And that really worries me, Tom. So my point is it'll make a huge difference. It's like nothing. It isn't. It's not what people are saying it's going to be. It's going to be very dangerous. And, of course, it'll be probably Kamala Harris who'll be leading all of that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, there's going to be a new set of challenges. There's going to be a new set of challenges. They're not going to be, they're not going to be small. But, that's what we do. Those of us concerned about public policy and those citizens out there, there's always challenges. I don't know about you, Sandy. I wasn't all that impressed by the Trump Justice Department. They were good on a lot of issues, terrible on others, AWOL on others, more importantly.
Yes, well,
so from
that's
our
true.
perspective, things aren't changing as much as they might for others.
Okay.
I don't want to say things are going to be great, but let's recognize the country will proceed and the fights will change in their nature and maybe the severity, but the status quo will continue in surprising ways.
Okay. Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. Tom, great to have you. Thanks for joining me. Sandy Rios in the morning, AFR Talk.